The frozen wasteland. Alex wiped the ice from his goggles, squinting through the blizzard as he trudged forward. The freezing winds gnawed at his exposed skin, and each breath felt like inhaling shards of glass. His ship, once a symbol of adventure and pride, was now nothing more than a smoldering wreck, buried beneath the snowdrifts on this forsaken planet. A failed engine, a miscalculation in trajectory, and a forceful impact had left him stranded on this barren, icy wasteland. The temperature outside had dropped to impossible levels, far colder than anything Earth had ever seen. His survival suit was designed for extreme conditions, but even it couldn't protect him from the bone-chilling cold forever. He had rationed his supplies as best he could, but time was running out. Desperation began to gnaw at his mind as he trudged across the frozen landscape, pulling his feet from one step to the next with increasing difficulty. His eyes scanned the horizon for any sign of civilization, but there was nothing. Just endless white, a frozen expanse that stretched on for eternity. Then something caught his eye. Through the thick snow and mist, a faint figure appeared, stumbling, barely visible in the distance. Alex squinted, certain he was imagining things. Was it another survivor? Perhaps another stranded traveler? He took a step forward, then another, until the figure became clearer. It was a woman, an alien, her lithe body barely covered by a thin garment. Her skin was a shade of violet he had never seen before, and her silver hair whipped around her face like strands of ice. She collapsed onto the snow with a soft thud, unable to continue any longer. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, he dashed toward her, his boots crunching against the snow. When he reached her, he knelt down beside her, his breath coming in quick gasps. Hey, are you okay?" he asked, trying to shake her awake. Her skin was freezing to the touch, and her breathing was shallow. The alien woman's eyes fluttered open, her irises glowing faintly in the dim light. She stared at him, confusion and fear apparent in her expression. Are you human?" she whispered hoarsely, her voice a melodic, almost haunting sound. Alex nodded, not sure how to answer. "Yeah, I'm human. But what are you doing out here?" Her eyes seemed to shift between him and the snow-covered wilderness. I was separated from my crew. The storm, it came too fast. I've been trying to survive," she managed to say, shivering violently. "My name is Lyra." Alex looked at her, struggling to come to terms with the reality of the situation. He had never encountered an alien species, let alone one stranded on a desolate planet in the middle of nowhere. But the cold was unforgiving, and neither of them would survive for much longer if they didn't act fast. "You need to get inside," Alex said urgently. "My ship's not far, I'll take you there." Lyra's face tightened with worry. "No," she whispered, grabbing his arm weakly. "My crew, they need help. I can't just leave them." Alex paused, considering her words. She was stubborn, no doubt, but her state suggested that help was beyond urgent. She was dying out here. "Your crew can wait. If you don't get warm, we'll both freeze to death before we make it anywhere." Her eyes locked onto his, filled with desperation, and for a moment, it felt as though they were communicating without words. She knew it was her only chance. "Fine," she said quietly, her lips trembling. "But we must go back. They're still out there." Without another word, Alex helped Lyra to her feet, wrapping his arms around her to support her as they made their way toward the wreckage of his ship. His mind raced, filled with questions about who she was, where she came from, and why she was here. But now wasn't the time for questions. They had to survive. The cold wind howled in their ears, but Alex could feel the heat of her body pressed against his. Even though they were strangers, he knew one thing for sure: they were in this together now. For better or worse, survival was all that mattered. An unexpected ally. The sound of crunching snow filled the air as Alex and Lyra trudged toward the wreckage of his ship. The storm was relentless, howling against them with every step. Alex's survival suit wasn't designed to withstand this kind of cold for long, and he could feel his energy waning. Lyra, leaning heavily on him, seemed barely conscious, her violet skin paling in the harsh, bitter wind. Her delicate frame shivered against his side, but she still held on tightly, her eyes fixed ahead with a kind of determined focus. "Almost there," Alex said, his voice strained but determined. Lyra's only response was a weak nod. Her breath came out in quick, shallow bursts, fogging the air between them. She looked fragile, more fragile than he had first assumed. Her strength and self-assurance from earlier had disappeared beneath the crushing weight of the cold. As they reached the ship's wreckage, Alex stopped for a moment to catch his breath. The once proud spacecraft was now little more than a half-buried heap of twisted metal. The crash had torn through the hull like paper, and parts of the ship were scattered for miles in every direction. It seemed like a miracle that Alex had survived. "Here," Alex muttered, pulling Lyra toward an entry point where the wreckage had been partially exposed. He squeezed into the tight space first, then helped her inside, shielding her from the worst of the storm as they entered the ship. The inside of the wreck was cold, but not nearly as much as the outside. Alex quickly moved to one of the control panels, trying to get the ship's basic systems back online. His hands moved with practiced precision despite the cold, but the flashing red lights of the damaged control board weren't promising. The power levels were nearly drained, and the systems were malfunctioning. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, slamming his fist against the panel in frustration. Lyra had collapsed onto one of the unbroken seats, her eyes fluttering closed. For a moment, Alex considered just letting the ship die, focusing solely on keeping them both alive long enough to signal for help. But that was too passive for him. He had never been the kind of person to just wait for someone else to rescue him. As he continued to work, he noticed Lyra watching him. Her gaze wasn't one of fear or helplessness, it was one of calculation. She had been silent for several minutes now, but it was clear she was thinking. "You're a skilled engineer," Lyra said quietly, her voice laced with exhaustion. "If there's anyone who can get this ship back online, it's you?" Alex glanced up, surprised at her sudden words of encouragement. "I've worked on plenty of ships, sure. But this is a wreck. It's going to take time and we don't have time." Lyra's violet eyes never left him, and her expression softened. "You underestimate yourself. You don't just fix things, Alex. You find solutions." He paused at her words, a sense of admiration creeping into him. There was something about Lyra that was different from the others he had encountered in his life, something that went beyond her alien appearance. She had a quiet strength to her, a kind of calm that made him feel like he could trust her, despite everything. Maybe it was the desperation that bound them, or maybe it was the bond they were slowly forming. But Alex felt like he wasn't alone anymore. Lyra's soft smile tugged at his heart. "I'm not asking for a miracle," she said, "but I'm offering you something in return." Alex raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Something in return? What could you possibly offer me?" Lyra's gaze darkened slightly, and her voice dropped to a near whisper. "I'm not just a stranded traveler, Alex. I was part of an expedition to this planet, sent here on an important mission. And I can help you, if you help me survive. We both have something to gain." Alex felt a chill run through him that wasn't from the cold. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. Her eyes glittered as she leaned forward, her voice steady now. "I come from a race that possesses knowledge, technology, far beyond anything humans have ever seen. The technology one have access to could change everything for your people, Alex. All you have to do is help me get out of here. Help me get to my ship and I'll make sure you and your people benefit. I promise." Alex stared at her, stunned by the offer. The implications of her words hit him like a freight train. Knowledge, technology. He had never thought about the possibilities of what a connection with an alien species might mean for humanity. Could this be the chance for humanity to leap ahead of its wildest dreams? But as the weight of her words settled over him, another thought came to mind. Was this a trap? Had she been sent here for a reason? Maybe she wasn't as much of a stranded traveler as she let on. Maybe there was more to Lyra's story than she had shared. But as he watched her, her vulnerability apparent even in the cold, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was being genuine. She was just as much a victim of the planet's ruthless environment as he was. And despite the uncertainty, her offer seemed too important to ignore. "What do you need me to do?" Alex asked finally, his voice steady, though his mind raced with the possibilities. Lyra's smile widened, and for the first time since they met, she looked genuinely relieved. "Help me get my technology back," she said simply. "If we can reach my ship, we'll have everything we need to survive. Together we can make it." Alex wasn't sure what he was agreeing to. His mind was too clouded by the weight of her words. But he had no other choice. If they had any chance of surviving this, they needed each other. And if she was telling the truth, the stakes were much higher than either of them had realized. "All right," he said, nodding firmly. "We'll get to your ship. But we'll have to be smart about this. The planet's not making it easy for us." Lyra's expression softened as she nodded in agreement. "I know. But together, we just might make it." And as Alex set to work, Lyra's words echoed in his mind. Technology beyond anything humans had ever seen. It was hard to fathom. But for now, survival came first. Lyra's plea. The hum of the ship's systems was the only sound that filled the cramped cabin as Alex worked tirelessly to keep the remaining power flowing. Lyra sat quietly nearby, her gaze occasionally flicking to him, though her thoughts seemed miles away. It wasn't the cold or even the harshness of the alien planet that had her lost in thought. It was something far more urgent. Alex's mind was focused on the task at hand, repairing the ship, making sure they didn't freeze to death. He moved methodically, not speaking much as he inspected the internal wiring, checking the life support systems, and verifying the last remaining power cells. His survival instincts had kicked in, pushing him to concentrate on the immediate need. But Lyra's eyes told a different story. Every now and then, Alex could feel her watching him, a subtle tension in the air between them. It wasn't just the desperation of their situation that weighed on her, there was something more. Something buried deep beneath her words, a secret she had yet to reveal. Finally, after what seemed like hours of silence, Lyra spoke. "Alex," she said softly, her voice carrying an uncharacteristic weight. "There's something I need to tell you. Something you need to understand." Alex looked up, pausing mid-repair. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, his eyes narrowing as he met her gaze. She hadn't said much about herself, her people, her mission, or why she was here. But now he could see it in her eyes. There was more to her than the survivor stranded on a frozen world. He had a feeling that whatever she was about to say would change everything. He nodded, signaling for her to continue. "What is it?" Lyra's fingers fidgeted nervously with the fabric of her jacket. Her eyes flickered to the cold window of the ship, where the snowstorm outside raged against the glass, as if it were trying to invade. The cold felt like it had entered her very soul. "I'm not here by accident," she began, her voice steady but laden with something far darker. "I was part of an expedition sent to this planet by a council from my world." Alex watched her carefully, his instincts telling him that she wasn't just talking about a standard scientific mission. There was something more, something about the way she spoke, the way she held her posture. She was carrying a burden far heavier than the freezing cold. This was supposed to be a simple exploration, a routine scan of the planet for resources and geological data. But there were things we weren't prepared for, she continued, her tone quiet but serious. When we landed, we discovered something. A presence, something that had been dormant for millennia. We didn't know the extent of its power, but we awakened it. Alex stood up, his hands frozen on the control panel. "What do you mean you awakened it? What was it?" Lyra hesitated before answering, as if the memory of what had happened was still too painful. It was a being, an entity that had been frozen beneath the surface of this planet. And now, it's awake. It's powerful. And it wants something. Something we weren't prepared to give. A chill ran down Alex's spine, and not from the cold. "You mean this planet isn't just inhospitable because of the environment? There's something else here?" Lyra nodded slowly, her expression darkening. "Yes. I believe whatever it is, it wants to use this planet for something. It has a purpose. It's been dormant for so long, but now that it's awake, it's drawn to us. My team is gone, Alex. Most of them are dead. But I managed to escape. I was the last one left." Her voice wavered as she spoke the last words, and Alex could hear the weight of loss in her tone. "What happened to them? How did they?" Alex stopped himself, feeling the urgency in the air. "How did you get separated?" Lyra swallowed hard, her eyes closing briefly as if trying to steady herself. "The entity, whatever it is, it's controlling the planet's environment. It can shift the weather, cause tremors in the ground, create deadly storms. We were caught off guard when it first attacked us. I ran. The rest of my team, they didn't make it." Alex's mind raced as the pieces started to fit together. The planet had been dangerous, but this was something else entirely. An alien force far more insidious than anything he had ever imagined. And now it was after them. "I know it sounds insane," Lyra added, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. "But I'm telling you the truth. The planet is alive, Alex. And it's using its power to hunt me down. I don't know how much longer I have before it finds me. But I need you to help me." Alex looked at her, weighing her words. The last part of her plea hung in the air, thick with emotion. Her vulnerability was clear now, and for the first time he could see the depth of her fear. She wasn't just a survivor fighting for her life. She was running from something far worse, a force that could destroy everything she had worked for, everything she had known. "What do you need me to do?" Alex asked, his voice steady, though his mind was still reeling from what she had just revealed. Lyra met his gaze, her eyes shining with a mix of desperation and determination. "I need you to help me reach my ship. We can't stay here much longer. The entity, it's already aware of my presence. It will stop at nothing to find me. If we can get to my ship, I can contact my people. I can warn them. And We can stop it before it's too late. Alex didn't hesitate. There was no more time for doubts or second-guessing. The stakes had just gone beyond survival. It was a fight against an unknown, powerful enemy that could destroy more than just them. It could destroy entire worlds. You have a deal, Alex said firmly. We'll get to your ship. Together. Lyra's face softened as she gave a small, grateful smile. But the relief in her expression was fleeting. She knew that time was running out, and every moment they spent talking was another moment closer to being found. We need to move fast, Lyra urged, standing up with some effort. The longer we stay here, the more vulnerable we are. We need to leave this ship and get to my ship as quickly as possible. Alex nodded, gathering his gear. The uncertainty of what lay ahead was heavy on his shoulders, but now he was more determined than ever to protect her, and in a way protect humanity itself. If they could stop whatever this entity was, they might be able to change the course of everything. The entity awakens. The storm outside intensified as the wind howled through the ship's broken hull. Alex could feel the biting cold in his bones, but the urgency of their situation kept him moving. Lyra had insisted they leave the wreckage, her fear and determination pushing her to take the lead despite her weakened state. They couldn't afford to stay any longer, not with the entity drawing closer. Alex didn't question her decision. He trusted her now, though every part of him wanted to understand more about the force they were up against. But time was short and they couldn't afford to waste it. The alien planet was already trying to kill them, and whatever was after Lyra, whatever had awoken beneath the planet's surface, was only growing stronger. They trekked through the snow-covered landscape, the wind slicing through their protective suits. Alex kept close to Lyra, his hand occasionally brushing hers for reassurance. Her condition was worsening. The pale color of her skin seemed to grow more pronounced, and she stumbled once or twice, struggling to maintain her footing. But she never spoke of her pain. Her focus remained solely on their destination. Her ship. Alex's eyes scanned the horizon as they moved, the heavy storm making it impossible to see much farther than a few feet. The sound of howling winds was deafening, but beneath it, something else was happening. It was subtle, a low vibration in the air, like the planet itself was waking up. Alex couldn't quite place it, but the sensation of being watched gnawed at him. He looked over at Lyra, who didn't seem surprised by the ominous atmosphere around them. Her face was set in a grim expression, as if she knew something he didn't. "This way," Lyra called out, her voice cutting through the wind. She was leading them toward a ridge in the distance, her eyes trained on something Alex couldn't yet see. As they drew closer, he could make out the faint outline of an ancient structure half buried in the snow, a structure that seemed far too deliberate to be natural. "Is that your ship?" Alex asked, his voice full of cautious hope. Lyra nodded, her expression tight. "It's not just a ship. It's where I can access the technology to stop what's coming. But I can't do it alone." She hesitated, then added, "That's why I need you, Alex." The closer they got to the ridge, the more Alex could feel the shift in the air. The ground beneath his feet seemed to hum, and the storm around them began to swirl in unnatural patterns, as if the planet itself was reacting to their approach. As they reached the entrance of the structure, Alex stopped, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon strapped to his side. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. Something was wrong. Lyra froze beside him, her head snapping to the side as if she had sensed it too. Her violet eyes narrowed, scanning the surroundings. "The entity is near," she whispered, voice trembling with urgency. "It's aware of us." Alex's grip tightened on his weapon, his breath shallow as he strained to listen. The air was heavy with a strange energy, an oppressive force that seemed to press in from every direction. It wasn't just the storm. It was something else. Something alive. Before Alex could react, the ground beneath them trembled, followed by a low, guttural sound that reverberated through the very earth. The vibrations grew stronger, more intense, until the air itself seemed to crackle with energy. The storm howled louder, but it wasn't the wind that made Alex's skin prickle. It was the unmistakable feeling of something ancient and powerful coming alive. Then a figure emerged from the swirling snow. At first, Alex thought it was another person, but as the figure drew closer, he realized it was far more than that. It was a being of energy, its form shifting and flickering like an ethereal flame, but with the faint outline of a humanoid shape. Its eyes, glowing an eerie shade of white, locked onto Lyra, and Alex felt a surge of dread course through him. This was no ordinary creature. It was the entity she had warned him about. The figure spoke, its voice like 1,000 whispers merging into one. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound anything like Alex had ever heard before. "You should not have come here," the entity intoned, its voice sending a chill through the air. Your presence has awoken me. Now you will serve. Lyra staggered back, her face pale with terror. She had been right. The entity wasn't just a force of nature. It was alive, aware, and it had its sights set on her. No, Lyra said, her voice trembling but defiant. I didn't awaken you by choice. I didn't know what you were, but now I know I have to stop you. The entity seemed to laugh, though it was more of a soundless echo that vibrated through the ground. You cannot stop what you have awakened. You have already given me what I need. Alex stepped forward, positioning himself in front of Lyra, his weapon raised, though he wasn't sure how much it would help against such an entity. If you think we're just going to let you control everything here, you're mistaken. We'll fight you. We'll find a way. The entity's eyes narrowed and the temperature around them dropped even further. Alex's breath came in visible clouds, his hands shaking from both the cold and the tension. The entity raised its hand, and the snow around them seemed to swirl with violent force. The air cracked with energy, and the very ground beneath them seemed to bend, as though the planet itself was responding to its will. Lyra grabbed Alex's arm urgently. It's not just a physical force. It's controlling the planet. The weather, the storms, the earthquakes, they're all part of its power. We need to get inside the ship now. It can't reach us in there. They didn't hesitate. With no time to waste, they pushed forward, entering the structure just as the entity's shadow loomed over them, its voice echoing in their minds. This is only the beginning, Lyra. I will make you regret this. But Lyra's gaze never wavered as they hurried inside. We will stop you, she whispered, more to herself than to the entity. We'll stop you together. The final stand. The inside of the structure was nothing like Alex had expected. The walls were made of an alien material, sleek, smooth, and reflective in a way that seemed to shift when he looked at it. The dim light that illuminated the corridors felt unnatural, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to stretch forever. It was as though the entire building was alive, pulsating with an energy that matched the strange vibrations in the air outside. Lyra moved quickly, her steps light despite the exhaustion that was clearly weighing on her. Alex kept pace, but his mind raced. The entity's words echoed in his head. It had warned them, and yet Lyra was determined. She wasn't running away from this. She was going to face it, and she needed Alex by her side. We're almost there, Lyra said, her voice tense, but her determination unwavering. The control room is just ahead. Alex could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. Everything they had done so far, surviving the storm, the shipwreck, and the entity's pursuit, had led to this point. But he had no illusions. They were up against something far beyond human comprehension. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't trained for this, and the odds of success were slim. But in that moment all he could think of was Lyra. He couldn't abandon her now. Not after everything she had been through. Is this where you can stop it? Alex asked, his voice low but filled with resolve. The entity? We can stop it here? Lyra nodded, her fingers brushing against a strange panel on the wall. Yes. The core of the ship is connected to the entity's power. If I can get to the control console, I can access its systems. I can reverse the flow of energy, shut down its ability to manipulate the planet. But it won't be easy. The entity knows what we're trying to do, and it won't let us. As if on cue, the walls around them began to hum, a low rumbling sound that seemed to grow louder with every passing second. Alex's heart skipped a beat. The entity was closing in. Lyra glanced back at him, her face hard with determination. Get ready. We don't have much time. Before Alex could respond, the ship's interior lights flickered, and the ground beneath them shook. The walls seemed to ripple, as if reacting to the entity's power from outside. A low, unnatural wind howled through the corridors, pushing against them as they continued toward the control room. They finally reached the door, an imposing metal slab that seemed to pulse with energy. Lyra approached it without hesitation, her fingers hovering over the panel. The ship seemed to grow quiet, as if it were waiting for something. Then, with a soft click, the door slid open, revealing the heart of the ship. Inside, a central console stood illuminated by dim, greenish light. The walls were covered with alien technology, sleek and unfamiliar, but Lyra seemed to recognize it all. She quickly moved to the console, her fingers flying over the interface, activating systems that Alex didn't understand. I can access the mainframe here, Lyra said, her voice tight with concentration. Once I do, I can reverse the power grid. But as she worked, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The entity's presence outside the ship was growing stronger, and the air in the control room felt thicker, charged with an unseen energy. He glanced over his shoulder, but there was nothing there yet. He knew the entity would come for them, he could feel it in his bones. Then the doors slammed shut with a violent force, trapping them inside. A guttural laugh echoed through the ship, chilling Alex to the core. "You think you can stop me?" The entity's voice echoed in his mind, deep and resonant, vibrating through the walls of the ship. "It's too late. I am the planet. I control everything here. You cannot escape." Lyra's fingers froze on the console. "It's here," she whispered, her voice trembling. The control room lights flickered, and then the walls seemed to shift. The ship was alive, responding to the entity's presence as it poured its power into every inch of the structure. The floor beneath Alex's feet trembled, and the air grew thick with a strange static. The hum of the ship's systems was now a high-pitched whine, reverberating in his skull. "I have to finish this," Lyra said, her voice full of urgency. "If I don't, we'll be trapped here forever." Alex turned to face her, his heart racing. He could feel the entity closing in, but he knew there was only one way out. If Lyra could access the mainframe, if she could disable the entity's power, they had a chance. But they had to survive long enough to make it happen. "Do whatever you need to do," Alex said, taking a defensive stance in front of her. "I've got your back." The air crackled with energy, and then a flash of light exploded from the control console. A surge of energy shot out, and Alex had to shield his eyes from the blinding brightness. When the light subsided, he saw it. The entity was there, standing in the center of the room. Its form was no longer flickering, it was solid, its ghostly figure now fully realized. Its eyes burned with an unholy light, and the ground around it seemed to warp, bending and twisting with its power. "You dare challenge me?" the entity hissed, its voice a cacophony of whispers that filled Alex's mind. "You are nothing. Just a fleeting moment in time." Alex's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood firm. He could see Lyra still working desperately at the console, her face pale with effort, sweat dripping from her brow. She was close, he could feel it. But they had no time left. In an instant, the entity's tendrils of energy shot out, slamming into Alex with a force that knocked the wind out of him. He was thrown back against the wall, pain radiating through his body as the entity's power coursed through him. His vision blurred, and for a moment he thought he might lose consciousness. But then Lyra screamed. "Alex, no." With what little strength he had left, Alex pushed himself to his feet, his vision swimming. The entity was moments away from reaching her. He couldn't let it happen. Not after everything they had been through. With a primal roar, Alex lunged at the entity, throwing himself into its path. He had no weapon, no plan, just a burning desire to protect the one person who had brought him this far. The entity's eyes locked onto him, and for a moment, Alex felt as though his very soul was being pulled into its gaze. Then, just as the entity reached out to crush him, the console behind him flashed bright with energy. The ship's systems roared to life, and a shockwave of force rippled through the room. Lyra's voice, filled with exhaustion but triumph, echoed in the chaos. "It's done. I've cut off its connection to the planet." The entity screamed, a terrible sound that shook the walls of the ship. Its form flickered, then began to collapse in on itself, its power fading. Alex staggered back, barely able to stay on his feet, as the entity's presence seemed to disintegrate into nothingness. Lyra ran to his side, her eyes wide with disbelief. You did it? You stopped it?" Alex looked around the now silent room, his chest heaving. They had won. Against all odds they had survived. But as the dust settled, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that their fight wasn't truly over. He turned to Lyra, seeing her exhaustion reflected in her face. "We stopped it for now," he said, his voice low. "But we have to keep moving. We can't rest yet." Lyra nodded, determination in her eyes. "We'll figure this out. Together." And for the first time since the crash, Alex felt hope stir within him. The new dawn. The silence was deafening. For a moment, everything was still. The walls of the ship were no longer vibrating with the oppressive force of the entity's presence. The air, thick with tension and energy, had cleared, leaving behind a deep, unsettling quiet. The power surging through the control room seemed to dissipate, and with it, the sense of imminent doom that had loomed over them. Alex took a step back, his body aching from the brutal clash with the entity. He could feel every muscle protesting, but there was a strange peace in the air now, a calm that had been missing since they first crashed on this alien planet. Lyra was beside him, her breathing shallow but steady, her face pale with exhaustion. But in her eyes there was something new, something fierce and resolute. "We did it," Alex whispered, almost not daring to believe it. Lyra's lips curled into a faint smile, though it was laced with weariness. "For now," she said softly. The entity is gone, its power broken. But the damage it's caused, it won't disappear overnight? Alex nodded. They had succeeded, yes, but the fight had taken its toll. He could only imagine what consequences awaited them. The entity's influence had spread throughout the planet, and though they had severed its control, the damage done to the ecosystem, to the very fabric of this world, might take years, or longer, to undo. The ship, now devoid of the dark energy that had permeated it, seemed to come back to life in a more subtle way. Its systems hummed gently as the light stabilized, casting a warm glow around them. It felt almost as if the ship had been waiting for this moment, its purpose finally fulfilled. But Alex wasn't fooled. There was still much to do. "You're right," Alex said, his voice steady. "We have to make sure it's completely over. And we need to figure out what comes next." Lyra turned to him, her expression serious. "I've been thinking about that too. The entity may be gone, but I've lost contact with the rest of my people. I don't know what happened to them, and I can't just leave things like this." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of unknowns. Alex understood. Lyra had come to this planet with a mission, and though they had defeated the entity together, there were still so many unanswered questions. Questions about her people, the ship, and what lay beyond the shattered calm of this world. "Then we'll find out," Alex said, a note of determination in his voice. "We've made it this far and we'll figure this out. Together." Lyra met his gaze, her violet eyes searching his, and in that moment, Alex felt the truth of her words echoing in his chest. They were far from finished. But there was no one else he would rather face the unknown with. The door to the control room opened and they stepped out, blinking against the harsh light that now flooded the corridors. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a stillness that was almost surreal. The alien landscape stretched out before them, vast and silent, its icy surface reflecting the first rays of the sun that now broke through the clouds. It was the first sign of dawn. Lyra took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs. She glanced over at Alex and for a moment he could see a flicker of something, hope, perhaps, or resolve. They had been through so much and now they stood at the edge of something new. "This planet, it's not dead," Lyra said softly, almost to herself. "It's been hurt, yes, but it can heal. And so can I." Alex turned to her, his heart pounding in his chest. "You'll heal, Lyra. You're stronger than you think. We both are." The two of them stood there for a long moment, the silence of the world around them contrasting with the storm of thoughts and emotions swirling within. The snow-covered terrain stretched before them, the remnants of the battle with the entity fading into the past. But their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more questions, more dangers to face. But there was a sense of finality to this moment, a sense of purpose that Alex hadn't felt since he first arrived on this planet. Lyra turned to him, a small, knowing smile playing at the corner of her lips. "There's still much to be done. My people need me. And this planet, it's not just mine to save. It's yours too." Alex chuckled softly, the tension in his chest easing. "Yeah, I guess it is now, isn't it?" He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, offering her his strength in that simple gesture. The warmth of their shared connection filled the air between them. "We'll figure it out," he said firmly, his voice filled with the kind of certainty that only came after surviving something impossible. Together. They walked away from the ship, side by side, into the unknown. The horizon before them was vast and uncertain, but for the first time since they had crashed, Alex felt a sense of peace settle over him. No matter what lay ahead, they had each other. And together they could face anything. The planet may have been scarred, but it still held life. And so did they. The sun broke fully through the clouds, casting its light over the desolate landscape. A new dawn had come. This is the culmination of their journey. They've defeated the entity, but the story ends with the promise of new challenges ahead. It's about finding hope and determination in the face of uncertainty, and Alex and Lyra's partnership is solidified, setting the stage for what comes next.